Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Come on in, sit on down. It's time for another episode of the Truther Therapy Sessions, episode 115. My, how the time flies. I have a special show for you guys today, something a little bit different, rather than just me rambling into the ether for 2 hours. I actually have a guest with me today, which I'm quite excited about. Just a bit of backstory. This is somebody I've started to listen to maybe quite a lot over the past 6 to 8 months, give or take, ducking in and out, And us over here in our little weird corner of the internet on this channel, we are a pretty out there, fringe, bizarre, niche place to be, aren't we? And I often find myself, my head is in the clouds, thinking about extremely esoteric, out there, bizarre concepts on the daily basis for this channel. And every now and then, I just like to dip back into normality and listen to this person, because he is a voice that kind of grounds my perspective a little bit and brings me a little bit back down to earth, and offers a great Christian perspective on kind of what's actually happening on the ground in the day-to-day from a British perspective. So this is not something maybe my audience is used to hearing about, because you're obviously involved in your own politics across the pond there. I think it's something like 80 to 85% of my audience is American. I think today could be a good show for all of us, because it kind of give you, the listener, some insight into what's going on in my country. But also, I think a good way to kind of touch some grass a little bit and kind of touch base with somebody who maybe isn't in the conspiracy world like we are, but perhaps also has some very profound, interesting things to say about Christianity, the state of the modern world, and solutions we can have to making things better and closer to something akin to the kingdom of Christ. And with that being said, and with that also being said, to prepare the guest for what he's got himself into, Richard, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, hello, Paul. Hello, everybody. Thankful to be on your show.
No, thanks for doing this. Again, I really appreciate it. I kind of went out on a limb, because I thought, is this person going to look at my channel and think, what am I doing? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this, You take one look at the Nephilim look like clowns and you wonder, what the hell is this guy talking about? But as I explained there, fundamentally I'm a Christian, but I'm what I call a backdoor Christian. So I came out of the New Age world originally, and I wasn't really raised in like a church environment, So I don't really know the rules of engagement of what it means to behave as a proper Christian in today's world. And I feel like, in a sense, listening to your story, you could at least appreciate that something similar from your own background. And if you'd like to maybe just explain to the audience, just to start off here, who you are, what your background is, and what you've been doing online for the past few years, and how you kind of got there, I think that'd be a good jumping off point.
Yeah, sure, happily. And just as I said to you before we went live, say to the audience as well, I have a bit of a cold, so if I do have to stop briefly to clear my throat, do forgive me. But yeah, I mean, happily go through my story. I mean, I think there's a long version and a short version. If I'm getting too lost in the undergrowth, to pull me back. But I think I could probably start with. Well, I won't go too deep into things, other than very average English guy. You could say very average Westerner. Nothing particularly shocking about my upbringing. Wasn't too poor, wasn't too posh. Somewhere in the middle. And I always kind of, when I look back, viewed myself as an early casualty of modernity, in a sense. A lot of the things we speak about today happened to me and my friends and close environment very quickly. I'm talking here, I remember being at school, average school, and friends of mine doing heroin and things like that, and thinking this just, at the time, you don't think it's weird, but when you look back, you think these kids were 14, going to the toilets in a break to shoot heroin. Well, actually, they weren't shooting it, they were chasing the dragon, but they ended up shooting it later. I think one of them died, and I think one of them got clean, and the other two, I never knew what happened to them.
Mm.
And in my own family, family members who got mixed up in drugs and just kind of never came back. So I sort of look back on things and can see there were trap doors everywhere in the way I was growing up. And of course, I was raised in a secular environment, which I think is average for an English person then, and probably is now.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any understanding of spiritual ideas or religious ideas. I mean, other than the local vicar, where you'd sing, a few hymns in what was it, assembly. That would be
Yeah,
it,
so
really.
he's got the whole world in his hands. Yeah, I remember all of
Exactly.
that.
All the
Yeah,
classics, all the
absolutely.
classics. Yeah, yeah. So that was it. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just took on liberalism and secularism by osmosis as part of the culture. I think I
Mm,
also rejected a lot of my own tradition and culture, not that I knew I was doing that, perhaps instinctually. Everything outside of the West to me seemed cool and edgy, and I sort of played to that. And I guess to cut a long story short, it kind of meant that I never really had any foundations in life. I was really moving from bad thing to worse thing. Not as bad as some people around me, as I say, but the way I've often explained it in my life is, when you're walking through a forest or whatever, and there's a path, and we all follow the path. But when you're a kid, it's normal to run away from the path. Part of growing up is leaving the path and playing around and stuff. And I think I did that, and many of my friends did that. But we played around so much that you lost where the path was completely. And
mm,
even some people who did find it down the road weren't even sure if that was the path that they were on in the first place. So I've always found that analogy, it helped explain my upbringing, not just for me, but people I was surrounded with as well. I don't think from meeting many people I'm alone in that experience. And of course, I'm
mm,
not trying to make out, or we should stay rigidly on the path. I don't think that's normal for a youngster. It's normal to try and find your own way. The point I'm making is we went so far out that you just lost your way completely, and no one was there
mm,
to guide us back. So, well, I was very lucky, as we'll get to, right, via being found spiritually. But the way I dealt with this really was originally going into sort of ideology. I guess Jordan Peterson spoke about this, and this all happened. I mean, I turned the corner long before I'd even heard about Jordan Peterson, but when that came around about, young Western men who are lost and don't have any guidance and almost rebel against the West in some sort of subconscious anger against it as to why was nobody guiding me? Why do I feel so betrayed? I think I
mm,
engaged a lot of Marxism in my early 20s, really, to be fair, and teens. And yeah, I mean, I just didn't really engage with life at all, other than in a sort of rebellious context. And then for me, um, I started to be blessed with some of the great challenges of life. They don't feel like blessings at the time, but I was hit from every angle. Again, friends passing away, family having challenges, learning the hard way that a lot of the things I'd basically bet on in my life, hedonism, women, thinking, that sort of lifestyle of having the woman would complete me, and again, as I say, the ideologies, and then even as I went in, I kind of got to I think it was about 24. My brother died at that point, and I realized, you know, what I'm trying to achieve in this world, especially through the ideology I was reading, isn't going to take me where I want to go. In fact, it's making me worse, and I'm getting lost in a lot of ideas here that are just so theoretical. They're just not resembling reality. So my way of dealing with that was to do the sort of counter version of, I would say, modernity, which is chase the money, try and get the status. And I became almost a bit obsessed with the personal development thing. And I got a good
mm,
job and learned how to be better with the ladies and all that sort of stuff. And on paper, I had the sort of life that a young Westerner would want. Half decent job in London. I'd come through a lot of hardship. I had a nice girlfriend at this point, but within, I was still quite lost. I really was quite lost. And I don't think I really knew how lost I was until, again, there was just from every angle, I was just being kind of pulled apart by stress from work, a very toxic environment full of drug users. Again, the woke thing was coming into the corporate space then. This was about
mm,
2013, maybe. And then this woman as well, I was very young and naive, and I was still of the mindset, oh, if I just find the right girl, it'll complete me. And I think deep down, a bit of me wanted my family dynamic back. And I think if I find that with a woman, I'll have that family again, which this was all subconscious, but that younger me will feel satisfied. It was still wounded inside, and you probably don't,
mm,
have to guess that it all ended up basically going bang in my life as I was coming to my late 20s. And I just realized everything I've been chasing, not just the ideology on the one side, but thinking a woman will complete me, thinking status will complete me, money will complete me, work will, and none of it did, and at the end of the day, I still had this kind of anguish inside, really. And I kind of had this breakdown is too strong a word. I wasn't like, going mental, walking naked down Oxford Street. It wasn't anything like that. But I just knew I was gone in my head. I thought, I can't continue like this. And in a sense, that gave me great compassion for many of the men who struggle in this day and age, because I felt, which what I think a lot of men feel keenly, which really was lost when you feel like you're in the middle of an ocean alone and no one can understand you. So I ended up kind of bottoming out, sorry. And in that bottoming out came, I guess, my first experience of what I could call total freedom. In a sense, you could say I was quite lucky because I just dropped all of these external beliefs that anything in the world could satisfy me. I kind of just opened myself totally, and this bizarre experience happened where beneath all of the confusion and turmoil and pain was peace, and I just did not know what it was. And I remember thinking, whatever this is, I need to try and protect this peace. And I remember, from forays and reading various bits, something about Christ said something about faith is like a mustard seed. And I remembered that. I remember reading bits of the Gospels and some of the classics then about, laying up for yourselves treasures in earth. I remember thinking, yeah, that's what I've tried to do. But, when people quote scripture, you think, yeah, all right, it kind of makes sense. But I really felt it. I was like, I know what that means on an instinctual heart level. Now, I didn't know anything, pardon me, about religion or spirituality, as I say, but there was an instinctive knowing that I have to protect whatever this thing is inside of me. It was right in my solar plexus, this small sense of peace, balance, whatever you want to call it. And from that moment on, I sort of went on a bit of a quest, really, to learn everything I could. And I tried to, again, I was kind of guided, I think, by the spirit. Instinctually, I knew that you can't overthink this because you'll ruin it. You'll turn it into ideas. I don't want to go there. So I started to meet some very interesting people. These weren't Christian at all. These were more sort of non-dual, new age types,
Hmm.
and some people from varying fields, of some people involved in what's called men's work, the sort of things where you go into the middle of a forest and beat your chest around a campfire and wrestle and all these sorts of things. They're sort of proto initiations. So I sort of became obsessed with all of this stuff because, like I say, I found that when I engaged in it, it grew that inner sort of sense of peace and light within. And that really set me on a path of spiritual exploration, which, well, has lasted to now, really. And this is well over 10 years ago this started. And the first thing I noticed, which made me think, oh, I think I'm onto something here, was I don't. I'm aware of all the prosperity gospel stuff, or you adopt spirituality and your life becomes wonderful. I'm not really pro all of that, but I could
Hmm.
tell that the neediness around women had gone completely, just gone, and relationships with them had improved massively. I was starting to see through the hookup culture of London, which was rife. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say I was perfect. I had moments of weakness, but I started to see, I don't know about this. I think these women would be better off having a guy who actually, they could build a life with a relationship, and maybe I would too. And I started to understand. The red pill came around then, and I was thinking, I get what these guys are saying about the dating marketplace and how it's completely lopsided, and we've moved away from essential natures. Of course, I think they were taking it down the angle of how to get laid, but I
Hmm.
wasn't really listening to that. I was more interested in what was going on socially while this sort of spiritual awakening was going on, which personally, as I say, I was more into at that time Buddhism, non duality, New Age schools, these sorts of things. And really, when it comes to the Christianity, it took a while for me to adopt a Christian frame. But for me, the key was, well, I'm in all of these you could say non-dual spiritual circles, which, if I'm honest, are all coded quite liberal left in their
Yeah.
orientation. I don't mind that in a sense, even though I don't think that way. But I thought, look, what we're speaking to here is meta political. I'm interested in the spiritual, so I don't really care if they want to go on a lecture about how awesome Jeremy Corbyn is. I'll just zone out for that bit and wait till the meditation starts. But various things happened around 2020, which just made me realize this is untenable. George Floyd was one, and COVID, and all these things, which to me were, well, I didn't think we were getting exactly the story that the mainstream was telling us. Sorry, there was more going on than what the mainstream was telling us, and I thought that was quite evident.
Mm,
And I started to think a lot of the people in these meetings were just not. They're almost ideological in their loyalty and fidelity to these mainstream narratives, which I started to think, well, you're almost getting trapped in the world here and not seeing it. This example I often give about I was in a meditation class and this guy walked in who was 6'4", fresh out of jail, scowling and a mean look in his eye, and he was scaring the women, and all these men who would talk about love all the time just walked off. I think they were frightened of him, and it was a real wake up call that you can embrace these ideas of meditation and peace, and I still do. I'm very fond of these things, but you need to counterbalance it with a sense of external wisdom. You shouldn't betray the masculine nature, the protective nature. And it felt to me that a lot of it was just ideological, utopian ideology,
mm,
when in reality there is a balance to be struck in life. And as you can see, that led me more down the road of, well, there must be people who think like me, who are deeply enchanted by the spiritual and esoteric, but also sense there is a sense of order to life, and men need to develop into something greater than they are. That's vital for them and for civilization. And I started to realize, well, look, what I'm talking to is Christianity, really. And I started to read, well, the Gospels thoroughly. But it was really Paul, I think, that spoke to me. I mean, of course, the Gospel spoke to me, but it was Paul in his letters. I remember really thinking, okay, this is that energy I've been looking for. And that sort of led me into broader traditionalism, which is, of course, understanding about the traditions around the world and how they have, if you like, similar themes. And one of the things I started to notice, which really spoke to me again, was, of course, you have this deep contemplative side, but that's counterbalanced with the warrior side. And the examples are just limitless. Sikhism, obviously they carry a knife. They have the warrior tradition. Islam have jihad. The Christian has the knight, which is really the priest crossed with the warrior. And on top of that, you even have within Buddhism, the Zen Buddhist monk and so on. And you have these traditions which prioritize the development of the male. Now, of course, they're speaking to an elite warrior class. And I wasn't saying I was becoming part of that, but it was more why it meant so much to me was recognizing that this wisdom was in our tradition. I wasn't some weirdo just thinking, oh, I don't get it, and this thing is just all about being soft. I started to realize, okay, there is very, very solid spiritual and philosophical grounding for the beliefs I have. And well, it's more than beliefs, it was the instincts I think I had. So hopefully I haven't rattled on too long, but that sort of led me to the position I'm in now. And at that point, I started doing. I had a YouTube channel before Richard the Fourth, and that was mainly on traditionalism and men's spiritual development. But that led me down that path. And then, of course, Richard the Fourth started, which is much more political. But I've gravitated more towards the spiritual side, which is really trying to reawaken the essence of Western tradition, Western esotericism. The elements of Christianity, I think, have been forgotten and probably obfuscated by the present liberal regime.
mm. Yeah, well, thanks for that. Yeah, that was a very cogent, succinct journey, and I kind of mapped it as I went along as you were speaking, so I could get some of the key points of that journey. I like that you explained, you were raised secular, rejected tradition, and then found yourself with no foundation, kind of scrambling away from the path to try and find something. And that's basically my entire story as well. It's like a copy paste story, and I realized myself that is actually pretty much the story of a lot of young men raised in modernity, as you would describe it. This time, this modern era from maybe like the 90s onwards. It seems like this is pretty much just the basic pipeline. And you do end up looking to fill that God-shaped hole in your heart, I would call it. But you don't know how to describe it like that because you don't have any framework to or a language to kind of fit it into. So you don't know that that's what you need in a sense. So you go looking for it, and usually you can end up falling into the world first, and you try and fill it with hedonism, money, ideological concepts or group thinks, or you may go after status is a good one as well, or again sex, image. You create like this ego, and you believe you are that thing, and that inevitably leads to nothing and falls apart around you and is just sand through the fingers. And then I think you described it best when you said you hit like this rock bottom place in your late 20s. Worse, finally, with all that stuff kind of dissipated and a realization that it is worthless, you find this peace. And that's where you have that first taste, isn't it, of what it means to have a relationship with God, if you want to call it anything, or at least a hint of what it means to let go of the world. And again, your story, it really is, it's my story. And I think it's the story of a lot of people listening today, even to this podcast. And I think, when I came into the space, it was for the same reason. I want to kind of let people realize, there is an answer. There is a place you can go where everything will kind of bring you that peace you're looking for. And you'll find that in Jesus Christ and the Gospels, it actually is there. But I think what you talk to is this issue of how can you make something like Jesus appeal to a modern secular mind? Because it's so out of context. How does a guy being nailed to a piece of wood in the Middle East have anything to do with me? You really don't know how to contextualize it, and it becomes through an ignorance of the source text first of all, not really understanding what the story even is to begin with, and making assumptions, which obviously I'm hoping through example we can lead people to realizing not every person who believes in Jesus Christ is Ned Flanders. There's more, there's a deepness to it, and there's a level to it, and a masculinity to it, I suppose, is what you're kind of aiming towards, which I think a lot of modern Christianity has kind of lost. Would you think that's a fair assumption?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are several things there that probably all tie in, from youngsters um, going astray as they tend to, because it's part of growing up,
Mm,
but then not really having the eldership to guide them home. And in many senses, despite all of the challenges, I think you say you've got similar experiences many men have in this day and age, but we do have an opportunity, I think, to be able to reach people perhaps that we never had. And it's one of my big aims in life is to work towards that, to strive to be an elder, to be able
mm,
to connect with some of the youngsters, because you do see this massive disconnect today between Zoomers and Boomers, especially, where they're just talking a different language. And
yeah.
again, one of the reasons why I became so interested in not just the spiritual themes, but the masculine themes, was these initiatory journeys, which used to be so replete cross-culturally, where you would have this moment of leaving the old you behind and almost be dragged into the realm of men. And it's not kind of a Andrew Tate thing about being, this amazing tough guy who gets all the girls. It's something a bit richer. It's a bit deeper. It's about facing those inner demons and overcoming something primal almost. And there's a lot in the initiation literature about the age of 30, and I think we just don't really have anything in our culture to guide men into that next step. When I say 30, I don't mean bang on, it might start at 25, it might be 32, 33. But I really felt that I went through a profound change in my late 20s, that really I just wasn't the same person by the time I was starting my 30s. And
Mm,
I had to basically do it all alone, or just pick up bits here and there with people. And even though I could start to get the essence of the church and the power of Jesus, if I went to a church, people would just look at me like I was mad, if I said any of this
yeah.
stuff. And it was, I mean, they're extremely sweet Christians in England. They really are. But that, in a way, that's the problem. They don't really know how to deal with the real, raw, painful problems in life. And, I remember I was part of a Christian community in London once. It was probably the best I've ever been involved in, but they were a bunch of guys who were from basically rough parts of town, but really into Christianity. But it was raw, they were really working it, and it kind of gave it this energy which I was craving. And like, obviously, I don't know what it's like in America. I understand the Christian tradition is a lot stronger there, but in England, it's almost completely swallowed by this soft, gentle, sort of liberal energy, which is, as I see it, it's almost been completely commandeered by the system. There are good people, that you can find, but they are quite few and far between. To
Mm.
be honest, that's why the online world is a bit of a blessing because you can find people who get it. But in my experience, in um, the average attending a service at a church, which I will do, I often will just keep my mouth shut. I just go to embrace the service, but I don't really interact with anybody because I've seen it before. If I start getting raw to them, it's a bit shocking. And I thought, well, this isn't what it's about for me. It's always about being raw and real and letting that light of the spirit guide you. And that involves, laying your weapons down and being open to the light of the spirit, which is hard. I get that, but I think again, it's a feature of the age we're in many senses, and it's why I speak a lot on the main channel I do about, we're in an era of collapse in my view, and that needs to happen because, as you say, it's hard for the modern mind to understand the deeply symbolic, the deeply spiritual, the deeply profound, because we're sort of sheltered in this bubble of modernity and rationalism, which we think will give us the great utopia, but in reality, it will just dig us that bit deeper in. So, in essence, yeah, I mean, I think we are in a bit of a bad way, but the way I see it is the precursor to the awakening. And again, I don't know if you know my sister channel, but that's where I'm really trying to speak about that more. It's called The Sacred Way. And a lot of people have reached out, Christian and otherwise, saying, "Do you know what? I'm really happy you're talking about these things because I'm just not getting that sustenance from the
Mm.
mainstream." I should say there are good people out there, though. I don't want to make out I'm the only person who's talking about this stuff. There are great people in the church and great people around, but we're sort of dispersed.
Well, it's funny. I when I was born again in 2014, for lack of a better phrase, that's basically what it was. I had that experience you're talking about and was out there trying to become a Christian as best I could from a position of ignorance. I went to the churches in my local area, and they really were not. They just were not. It's like you said, they're lovely, kind, sweet people, but they're not ready for the world. They have
Mm,
no idea what's going on.
yeah.
Have no idea.
Mm,
And I was viewed as crazy and like, who's this guy who's randomly just turned up, rough around the edges, talking about some absolutely outlandish things to them from their ears, like, what is he on about? And I was like, this is not meat here. This is milk. This is
yeah.
it's a meetup on Sunday to have coffee with the community. It's not
Yeah.
really a place to coordinate a Christian uprising and rebellion against modernity, as you probably would describe. It wasn't that type of thing. But the online space where I kind of got my information, where I learned about Christianity, and you get the American voices. And again, I say this a lot on the channel, but nobody does Christianity like an American. It's a completely different world to British Christianity. It's just not the same, and they
Mm,
do have a more of a prosperity, on fire, zealousness about them, which is it's just like, again, from a British perspective, it's like, oh, that's a bit much. It's shocking to our system. Like, it's just, we're just not raised to be like that. Religion's this thing you don't talk about around the dinner table along with politics.
mm,
And I think now those conversations are being had louder, even in Britain. I think there is this undercurrent of legacy Christianity who are in the churches who just don't understand. They are just not in touch at
mm,
all. And I think what we're seeing is this rise online of people like me or you even who are the vanguard for this new way of doing it, which I think is wholly necessary. I think people do need a wake up call, and I think it does come with pointing out the true horrors that surround us and the obvious solutions, which is we need to get back in touch with who we actually are and what built this civilization to begin with, if we have any hope of clinging on to it. So I agree with you, and I had the exact same experience. I mean, you don't sound very old. Just talking about the gap between boomers and zoomers. Are you a boomer yourself? I don't think you're much older than I am. Is that a fair assumption?
No, no, I'm a millennial. I was born in '86, so I'm
Well, there you
coming up
go.
40. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, same as me. I'm a relative. I'm 92, so relatively late stage millennial. But I think we lived a relatively similar life,
Yes,
in
no,
that
sure.
respect.
Part of the
And
same cultural landscape.
Yeah, I don't consider myself old yet, but I guess I am. You know, you lose once you get past 30. Like you said, you kind of. I already started to feel out of touch. Like I feel like a 50-year-old man. My knees started to go. My back hurts a lot more than it used to. Now maybe having two kids has done that to me as well. I've got a lot of grey hairs suddenly appearing in the beard. But one thing I just want to pull back on there. You said you went into kind of like the New Age spiritualism, and you talked a lot about Buddhism and the non-duality, and that's also kind of where I fell into first as well. I don't know why it's kind of easier to go there first than just to go straight to Christianity. It's kind of like you need to go through the pipeline in a way if you don't have a context to kind of just understand what it means to be spiritual.
Yeah,
Like,
no, exactly.
yeah. Do you have a similar? Because and I saw what you saw. It's kind of from a conspiracy perspective, we would describe it like this. No, it seems an awful lot like this New Age religion is perfect for that New World Order they keep talking about. It leans towards that liberal globalist. We're all one consciousness together, connectedness. We need the utopia ideology. And I could see I was never into that. I just hated it. I was like, I don't want to align my chakras with crystals, and I don't want to do all the tantra. I don't want to do all that stuff. I just want to understand who God is and what's going on. But they could never satisfy that answer. Do you find it sounds like you may have had something similar? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I guess so. I mean, I think off the bat, I think one of the things about that whole non-duality New Age movement is it is easily accessible. And I do
Mm,
think it's not a bad starting place, I think, for people, again, as you say, to learn about spirituality and the ego and the light of the spirit and these sorts of things, and even basic practices that come with it. And I think a lot of it, I mean, some of it I think goes way off into a lot of nonsense territory, but some of it is very real and raw spirituality. But I think the problem for me became so evident that this was detached from anything which resembled a broader tradition that could aid society in a sane and helpful way. And that I started to realize a lot of it, say if you find this enlightenment that they speak about, which I'm sure people do and the rest of it, but what is it? It's just an individual realization. And then what? Well, then I guess you just return to the classes for the rest of your life or whatever. And as you might imagine, that meant there's a lot of people who think that they found it, but probably haven't. And as always with those movements, there was always some weird sex. I always found like almost 50% of it ended with. I don't mean literally at the satsang, whatever I was doing, but there was always some rumor about the teacher or the group. And again, it was just this slow wake up call that look, you need sort of a higher structure, a tradition to moderate things that's worked throughout time. So again, I think the pieces were coming together for me to understand something that was a bit more rich, perhaps. I've also personally always viewed Christianity as a bit of, in one sense, of course, it's welcoming to everyone, but I think Christianity, as in real Christianity, is really profound and very powerful and quite deep, and you can easily miss it. And I think you can misread a lot of the guidance Christianity will offer, often from bad teaching and perhaps a lot of cultural mess. And it's been dragged in directions perhaps it shouldn't, where people will think, well, it's just being told not to touch your winky, isn't it? It's just someone yelling at you for that. And because we've lost the wisdom in our culture because what it would be is, don't get lost in the sexual, it will pull you in. And again, I think I speak to many guys today who find out with hookup culture or porn or whatever it is, will say, oh, I kind of get what Christianity was saying now. Now I'm 40 and I look back and I think, oh, it made sense. But the
mm,
point I'm making is I started to realize that the broader structures weren't really there to provide wisdom for the whole. It was very individual, ironically enough. Again, I would echo what you said about they sort of tried to utopianize the material by making the spiritual teaching we're all one. I remember listening to
mm.
this meditation about like Derek Chauvin and George Floyd and how they're both one. And I was like, I don't think people who are questioning the official narrative have any problem with the spirit being the spirit of all. So they're just kind of misreading it, if that makes sense. And then the big one for me was, a lot of the Eastern traditions and the Westerners don't like to say this. We like to think of yoga as something we do 3 times a week, and isn't it wonderful in our hot pants and the rest of it. the freedom of the Eastern practice, from free from dogma and the rest of it. But I started to realize, especially as I started to explore more traditionalist ideas, look, this way of approaching spirituality creates very certain societies and civilizations that are very unique to those people. So I grew up in Leicester, a lot of Indians there, and you have things like arranged marriage, which weren't alien to their culture, and especially common to this day still in India. Now,
Mm.
through the prism of their spirituality, the idea is, well, you don't have an ego. So you want the wisdom of the caste to decide for you. You want well, you can even say the wisdom, the light of the spirit, whatever language they would use, the Atman or whatever. When I started to see, well, I can see why they've constructed their societies in that way, and that's fine. That's their way, no problem with that. But what we're doing in the West is almost taking the bit we want and ignoring the broader cultural and social implications of their tradition, which started to, again, kind of stick with me and make me think, well, hang on a minute. That's kind of disrespectful to their tradition in one sense. It's underselling what is theirs, but in another sense, we want to maintain our Western individualism while having the nice ideas of, peace and enlightenment. So again, I started to think this isn't going in a way which I think is healthy. Again, not just for me, but in terms of following a tradition and of course civilizationally, because I was starting to think on that level at that point. And that again took me back to the essence of the Western tradition and Western
Mm.
civilization, and thinking, well, how has our tradition created who I am and what I am, not just in the modern world, because I'm obviously wary of modernity in many senses, but even pre-modernity, which I would personally describe as really the 1800s. What were we like before then? What's the essence of our tradition always been? And I do think there's a uniqueness in how we've practiced it. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I think there are Platonic elements which are central to the Western tradition and Aristotelian elements. But broadly speaking, I started to see, okay, there's this wide structure, which to my mind, we've been fractured away from. And now there is this great yearning for it, and this almost this energy that we can all feel that we've lost something, but there's something in our soul which is calling for us to come back home. I don't know about you, but I don't think it's found its channel yet in the external world. People are trying to find it everywhere, from street movements to different churches. But I personally think it's in us where it should be, but it hasn't quite found its fruition yet. And I'm all right with
Mm.
that, because the spirit comes when the spirit comes. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I've started to think all these pieces are coming together on a cultural and spiritual level, if that makes sense. And like I gestured towards earlier, I think we often have to fall apart, like I did in my late 20s, in order to let that light come through. It's almost like our pride breaks, and then we can start to see the way again.
Mm. I mean, I think there's a lot of someone in the comment here is reiterating a point about Helena Blavatsky's influence and the Theosophical Society's influence in kind of
Yeah.
introducing these ideas to the West over 100 years ago and then some, and obviously Alice Bailey picked up the mantle and continued and kind of repopularized Luciferianism under the idea of like the light bringer. And it's kind of this idea that mankind needs to go through an evolutionary spiritual process in order to leave behind the dogmatic religions of Christianity over to the light of Lucifer, which is knowledge to them. Knowledge is power, It's like a Prometheus analog, stealing fire from the gods and bringing it down to man so we can become like gods ourselves. And I think the New Age thought tends to be just that in many packaged varieties. And I think they kind of bastardized a lot of the Eastern mysticisms of Buddhism and Hinduism and packaged it in like a Western way. And yoga kind of comes with the package, But
Yeah.
realistic, I'm very skeptical because of all of this agenda to basically undermine our tradition and replace it with this bastardized New Age amalgam of many Eastern traditions. But that isn't to say there isn't wisdom in the Eastern traditions. I think they have it bang on about the nature of creation and how it operates, duality and the rest of it, But they tend to leave out that there is a creator separate from the creation itself, and they tend to lean more towards we are all God collectively instead, or something like this. And I think what makes Christianity fundamentally different from that belief system is that it offers something those other religions don't, which is a humble nature of I am not God and I'm a sinner and I need a savior. those other religions do not demand that as a prerequisite. And I think there's something profound about coming at it and living your life from that perspective of not being the be all and end all of all things, and actually being broken. And I think that humble nature is what built the Western civilization to be what it is and to be as fantastic as it is, which gives us this inalienable right as humans, of freedom. And I think that's what Christianity and its tradition fundamentally offers. I think if you remove that humble, basic underpinning of Christian thought, which is that you are a sinner who needs a savior, you need to bow down to a king. You need to serve the kingdom. You need to see yourself as a subject rather than the king itself. And I think in a way, that's something other religions just don't really tend to offer from the East. It does seem like, there's many ways about losing the ego, losing oneself to material possessions, which comes with Buddhist thought. I understand that concept, but underpinning it all is that, well, that gives you ability to break out of the cycle and to reach enlightenment and become like a god yourself. It tends to lead to some self-aggrandizing idea of ego death and becoming superior or a superhuman as a result of something else, some kind of enlightened entity. And I think fundamentally Christianity is not that at all. It's an understanding that yes, you can be better, but you'll never be as God. And I think that frees you in a way those other religions can't free you, because they're still chasing something. I feel, they're chasing after something, and it's status. I suppose it's another version of that. Do you have any thoughts on those ideas? I just randomly spat out at you there, just some of my own thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think it's complex territory, this, and in many senses, there are different Eastern approaches, of course, as well, and different people take them in different ways. I think the thing that you touched on, which I think is perhaps most important in this day and age for us, there is something unique about Christianity in one's brokenness and the redemption that comes with Christianity. And I have wondered before what would happen, in this sort of idealized world of the new atheist where Christianity is nothing more than just a forgotten myth of the past.
Mm.
How on earth man would survive without that? And I don't think we'd last very long, because there is something that, it depends, I suppose, what level we're talking at of spiritual experience. But I do think there is something fundamental about the brokenness, and I think there is this the problem. Why I'm wary of this is, again, I think a lot of that deserves. You need elders and you need experts to really guide someone through their brokenness. And I don't know about you and your Christian experience, but if you did have any brokenness, did you find it was Christians that guided you through, or did you find you were finding your way yourself a lot of the time, or was it a bit from column A and a bit from column B?
Yeah, a little bit, a bit of that. I think I was on my own. I went through an isolation period, which I
Mm.
think is wholly necessary when you actually reach that bottom moment to be
Mhm.
on your own with your own thoughts for a while. I think that's when you really truly hear the voice of God,
Mm.
and still quiet guide, shall we say. I did have that period of time where I was isolated and really working on myself and confronting my own inner demons, if you want to call them anything, for like maybe 3 to 4 years. And in terms of, like I said, I did the whole putting myself out there to the churches thing, and I felt rejection from those places for quite quickly, because I just wasn't what they're used to, and no ill will towards them. I understood. I was like, yeah, I'd probably look at me strange too, to be honest. So I did kind of have to do it on my own, but I did have the internet, thankfully, and you can listen to lectures from preachers and of all denominations and versions, from Orthodox, Catholic to Protestant, whatever you want to say, and I kind of took it all in from those to kind of teach me. And they were like the elders. I think Derek Prince, I don't know if you're aware of him, was kind of a huge influence for me in the early days. And he comes from actually more of a Pentecostal charismatic type, which you can say what you want about those people, but fundamentally his message of just preaching the gospel as it is, and the message of love and the understanding of what it means to take responsibility, and how to walk uprightly as a Christian in the world, and it's kind of it spoke to me. It was a good example. It's kind of the example you need. So I do see the validity in having like a community of elders, if you want to call them anything, people who have experienced and gone through the Christian walk, and to teach the young what it means to be a Christian. And I actually was quite scared because I could see a falling away of any of those voices to replace these older generation Christians. It didn't seem like there was actually many voices out there to guide a new generation, because modernity was doing its thing and liberalism and secularism was really taking over, and New Age thought was really prominent during when I was kind of trying to find information on what it means to be a Christian. And it was like when like Zeitgeist was being released, telling me that Jesus Christ is just a representation of the solar system or the constellations, or a knockoff of Semiramis or some other older gods throughout the pantheons of many. There's a real full frontal attack, I would say, on Christianity itself and the character of Jesus and what he truly was. So I kind of had to battle through that minefield just myself, and thankfully that moment of silent contemplation where I was on my own for a while, I think rooted me solidly in my foundational faith to not kind of listen to those voices that wanted to sway me more towards the New Age liberal version, the false Jesus, shall we call it, where everything's just love and light and consciousness, and we all need to become like Christ ourselves. I really stuck to the core message of the gospel. Is that, nobody gets to the Father but through Jesus Christ. He didn't say to become like Jesus Christ. He said through him. And I think there's a humbling message about that we do need to get on our knees and repent and ask for forgiveness, and be covered by his sacrifice. And again, that's a message you just don't hear from anywhere else. And I think I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones that kind of got through to me and stuck. But I see a lot of like Gnostic Christianity is quite popular these days, which again is like a seeking of wisdom is going to save us. If I can just know enough stuff and get the right sigils down, or learn the right mantras, or read enough grimoires, or whatever it takes, you'll become the most powerful Christian wizard, then maybe I can be like God. It's still that attitude of I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to save myself through knowledge. But I think the real Christianity is understanding you can't. You can't.
So, are you part of a tradition at all, or as in like a Catholic or any denomination, or do you have?
No, I'm a non. I would call myself a non-denominational,
Yeah.
because I don't see any validity in being a part of a divided body necessarily, but I see there's wisdom in many of the traditions themselves, and I think the Catholic tradition. I was semi-raised in. My grandma was a devout Catholic, a very devout Catholic. My father, her son, rejected it outright. But he always had an undercurrent. I believe in God, but I'm just not religious about it, And it was never really a thought in our house as I grew up. But I watched her and her tradition, and her devoutness. And I definitely think that stuck with me as an example, my granddad as well. And I remember praying as like a 5-year-old because a bird had fallen out of its nest and died. Like a baby. And I remember burying it and praying, and that's a distinct memory in my mind, those things stick with you forever, So I do think that's the only closest thing I have to any form of tradition, the Catholicism itself. But I don't follow the Catholic doctrines of having to go through the saints or the icons, or having to confess to a earthly man as an intermediary to get to God or any. I don't believe in those concepts as a Christian myself. I think a lot of unnecessary ritual and traditions of man have kind of taken over the core basic relationship with God. So I would call myself a non-denominational, but people could probably categorize me in many ways based on what I just said there. But I personally, I wouldn't call myself a part of a particular tradition. So even in the UK, as a Christian, I'm an alien here because I don't fit anywhere. It's an odd place to be, but online, I think I found my people, my community, my fellowship, and like I said, there isn't a day that goes by where I'm not in some way working on my relationship with Jesus and the Father, through these conversations with people like you today. But again, I'm open to hearing all perspectives and always learning, which is why I like listening to you, Richard, because you are seen to be you went a different way to me as somebody in Britain who kind of went through the same experiences, but you're seeking that tradition. And in a way, maybe I've kind of avoided that. So I'm open to listening to you to see what you have to say about it. You know what I mean? Because I'm still young. I'm only 33. I don't know everything. I've got the basics down, the Gospels and the rest of it, and biblical history and the pseudepigraphical and the extra canonical, and I've gone through whatever I can, and I've got a holistic image of biblical history and where it comes from and what it is to believe in Jesus and the purpose of the sacrifice and the rest of it. But when it comes to walking in the world, trying to find a way to get that message to a wider audience, I find denominations limit your scope. They actually isolate rather than open gates and bring the body together. That's kind of my feeling on it, and I don't know what you have to say. What's your opinion? Where are you on this?
Well, I mean, I think at the moment things have fallen apart to such an extent it's hard to find a valid tradition in the true sense of the word, as in, if you think about Christ, or even just after Christ, even before the Gospels were written, what were the early Christians doing together?
Mm.
What practices were they engaging in, and so on, and how raw and powerful all of that must have been. And then,
Tearing
of
down old
course,
systems, you read the book of
right,
Acts,
right, and for sure. And then you have this, obviously, these massively controversial debates about differing churches and different traditions within Christianity about, well, what Christ was doing and who did he found his church? Well, everyone knows it's Peter, but, arguments about the lineage and the rest of it and how that developed. And I personally think that there is the spiritual truth that we thrive on and nourishes us is written into being itself. It's unavoidable. It's why I even remember back in the early days in Leicester, these two girls arguing. I was only about 14, and I remember these girls were like, I'll speak the truth, yeah. And I remember thinking, why would you care about the truth? Like, what is it about human beings and that word truth? We know even when we're arguing as kids, there's something about truth which is just so essential. And again, you can argue that's been penetrated through the Western canon into the present day. But you think, well,
Mm.
why do we orient ourselves around this idea of truth? Why not say just lie and do whatever's right for you and just try and succeed in this kind of Nietzschean way? And maybe some people do that, but we kind of know if you have that turn, something's gone wrong. So, I think that the living, or you could say that, the Holy Spirit, Jesus is a living presence, God is there all the time. And with that comes the way, quote unquote. But I would say at different periods throughout time, our worldly traditions have sometimes been a very, very good incubator for that. And I think they've given it true life. And I think at other times they've done the opposite and they've been conquered by worldly powers, perhaps right as we have right now. Personally
Mm.
speaking, I'm more and more drawn to the Orthodox Church. It's very difficult for me to go because the nearest one is about 2 hours away, but I do go sometimes. And a lot of it is in Russian as well. So, I'm just standing there kind of like twiddling my thumbs thinking, I think
Yeah.
they say Jesus there. But so I'm very drawn to Orthodoxy, especially also because it's more sort of mystic in orientation.
Yeah,
So if I
it's funny. It's
was
funny. The Orthodox are always trying to recruit me. I'm not gonna
really,
lie. The amount of times I've heard, "Come on, Paul, we have the true apostolic succession all the way back to Peter. Like we are the true church. Like we are the ones you need to come and join. You're so close to being an Orthodox, but you just need to take that step and come and join us." And I'm like, "Look, I can't. I can't. Something in my core is telling me I shouldn't be choosing a side, and picking a
yeah,
team
man, yeah,
when it comes
yeah,
to this
yeah.
type of thing. And it's not like I don't respect the way they do it. Those guys are hardcore with their practices, and like I've read the story today of a monk who never even saw a woman in his entire life. He lived to 85, you know what I mean? Living in this monastic church where he gets found as an orphan and raised, and they are seriously like, they take it very seriously. So in terms of like people, following a hardcore tradition and sticking to it, the Orthodox have it down. I can appreciate that, but I feel like for the time we are in, I think God's moving in different ways, and I think different people require different methods for certain times to reach him and for him to reach them. And there's someone called Dan who listens. He has his own channel, and he describes it as like we're God's action figures. He's in control fundamentally, but every now and then he can use one of us to do something, and and you're lucky if that's the case. It may not happen, but it may happen. And I feel like with the circumstances, with the collapse we're seeing right now, and the absolute kind of turning the way Western civilization seems to have turned its back on God for the better half of the 20th century up into now. I do feel like the stuffy old tradition, which has a bad image, unfortunately, and maybe the Catholics raping little boys didn't help, but it seems like a new way needs to be created to reach the people with the basic gospel. And I think the institutions, unfortunately, as corrupt as they are now, are probably not the way God would do it today. Maybe it worked for the apostles in Acts immediately after Christ, and maybe it worked for a good 1,000 years for the Byzantine Empire and the rest of it, but I feel like something's changed. And I think us being in modernity as it is, I think God reaches people where they're at and where they are. And perhaps it's through more individual voices like mine and yours that this is done. And many of the people I listen to as my own inspiration. And I think, different times call for different measures. So that's kind of a quick comeback to that. I don't know. I'll give it back to you. I'll give the ball back to you.
Look, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think again, there's just two quick points. On tradition, I understand what you're saying. Like the Catholic Church has obviously been rocked by a serious amount of scandals, and even now it seems to be going the way of the Anglican Church with its embrace of LGBTQ and the ideology
Mm,
that comes with that. Um, and again, I think it's important, and I think this is starting to awaken within people. You know, when when I talk about tradition, it doesn't mean what the Catholic Church is. It's the living tradition, which is
yeah.
beyond the world in a way. The world is just a reflection of the true
Mm,
tradition. As I say, sometimes it's an accurate, clean mirror. Sometimes it's very much not. And again, I think the other thing, which I think is really key, at least in my view at the moment, is this. Look, I do think there are many people who are clearly tapping into profound truths about what truly sustains us, but most importantly, what sustains the civilization.
mm,
And I think a beauty of that, of course, is that you find in these voices and these people. But a downside of it is, again, we're all very dispersed and there's no real organizing body. But in a sense, as I often say, I don't think we're ready as a society yet to truly have that, to truly have that organization. Because in a way, I prefer it the way it is. Because again, the spirit moves in a wiser way than we can, and it's
mm,
almost like things have to play out a little bit before we're really ready to build something which actually reflects again the truth of the spirit. So again, it's one of the issues of our age, and why I say to lots of people who will reach out to me and saying, "Well, look, what do I do at the moment? I can't find that tradition." And of course, well, it's the same answer. We have to use the challenges of modernity to show us where God is, because it's where modernity isn't most of the time. And with
yeah.
that, I think we're also introduced to preparing the foundations of our soul, but also our culture for the light of God. Because at the moment, so many people have shut the door, they're closed off to it. And it's just a classic biblical tale. It's pride cometh before the fall. And we think that we can outthink God. We think that we can find alternatives to God. We think it's mad when you think about it. I don't want to get too into the fact of existence, but the more you contemplate life and existence, like I've got this problem with my eye at the moment. I've got these crystals which aren't firing properly in my eye. But I'm learning about my eye from this optician, and I'm like, this is just made with the most incredible dexterity. There is no way that a few atoms firing around for no reason. And as soon as you start to get it on that level, you're like, yeah, we're here now. Like the mystery of life is God manifest itself. And I think once that touches you, which again we're so much sheltered from in modernity, from those raw realizations, that once we start to reawaken to the essence of life once more, I think we'll be ready. The way I see it right now, we're in a position where, one of my, I'm sure same with you and all Christians, one of my great heroes, John the Baptist. I think we're all in a bit of a John the Baptist position at the moment, and the best thing we can do is be preparing the way for the light
Mhm.
to re-enter the world.
That's exactly it. I think that's the position we actually are in, unfortunately. Um, and like you said, I think the way you described it, maybe I'm going to try and paraphrase here to see if this is actually hitting the point, but it's kind of we're not ready for a fully organized institution to be formed where we can all come together as Christians of many denominations, understanding that we are one body in Christ, yet simply because it would get corrupt too quickly in the state of the world as it is right now, as modernity is currently. And I think God knows that. So I think we're going back to the basic form of ecclesia, where, where two are gathered in my name, two or more, you have a church, Christ is there. And I think we've gone back to this smaller, this right now, I would call this a form of fellowship. This is happening right now. Two Christians are together having a conversation about what it means to wrestle with God and have that relationship with him and to manifest the kingdom here now, shall we say, in some way. How are we going to do this? This is a meeting, this is a work meeting more than anything. But I think that's what we have to go back to right now. And maybe if we can reach a critical mass doing it this way, then maybe we will be ready to have that movement. I have a friend, he goes by, his channel's called The Cult of Con. Really devout Christian brother. Really passionate. We could call him a social justice warrior for Christianity in terms of his attitude and his passion. That's a good way to describe him. And he believes we can manifest the kingdom right now if we just understand our authority. And he describes it in a great kind of phrase. My moderator Wendy came up with is kind of either know your authority or no authority. It's that simple. And that's what it means to be a Christian, to realize you're not just, yes, you're a sinner. Yes, you need a savior. But once you've accepted that and given that sin over to Christ and that burden and lifted that off of you, you are now a subject of the kingdom. You're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom is within, and we can walk uprightly right now on earth, not as members of a country necessarily, or a man-made tradition or a flag or whatever it is, but as I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And we're here right now to manifest that here as best we can until the Master in Chief himself actually comes and sorts it out for us, and the new heaven and earth is actually here as it should be. The real utopia that we should all be looking forward to, not this worldly version which the liberal regime is aiming for. And I think there's something powerful about understanding that. It's kind of, if Christians, because I think that this is something I want to pivot to, because there is this rise of like a Christian identitarianism on the right now, a nationalism, a Christian nationalism. And I'm all, when I look at it, like my body, my flesh is like, yes, this is what we need, right now to fight back against the invading hordes and the rest of it, But then this voice, the still voice, is telling me that that's not the way to do it. I don't feel like it's actually, we don't need another crusade. I don't think that's necessarily the way we should be going here. And I think this could be the solution to understand, no, it's about authority, not power, not brute force. And I think if every Christian could actualize and realize who they really are, a member of the kingdom of heaven, and stand up with that authority against the kingdoms of man, who objectify them and basically enslave them, to one lesser extent than the other, I think that would give back our power. And it's a self-transformation. It's a realization of what it means to really be born again and to be saved, a real tangible way of viewing it than just, when I die, I get to go to heaven. It's like, no. Being saved means right now on earth, you have authority. Take it. Go change the world, do what you can. While you're here, don't waste that time just going to a ritual every Sunday, just waiting for things to happen, because they're not going to happen. You go out there and do it right now. Flip some tables, go out there and proclaim the kingdom, just as it did in Acts. And I think that if we could remember that, I think that's maybe the masculine Christianity we really need to remember and go back to. Not this, let's just start another crusade and go and kill a bunch of people and reclaim our lands type of Christianity, if you get what I mean. And I feel like that's what, if there is a conspiracy, then that's what they're angling for. And I feel like as soon as Christians get violent, they've got us. They can frame that in such a terrible way. And they can bring in laws that outlaw Christians as extremists. And they can do all sorts of things with that kind of action. They control the media, so they'll frame it. And that's kind of the predicament we find ourselves in. And maybe I'm getting a bit conspiratorial. I don't know. I'll give that back to you. What do you think of that concept?
Well, I think it speaks to what I was touching on earlier with, in my view, there is this yearning, I think within many a Westerner, because it's in the West, we're seeing this collapse. But it's not finding a channel. It's not finding a channel to express itself in a deeply truthful way. And this is why, you find, especially with, this Christian nationalist movement on the right at the moment, which a lot of the time doesn't feel very Christian. I think, as you said, you alluded to, and I do sympathize with lots of the guys, but it's sort of, it's feeding into something which is more identitarian than Christian, which is, of course, I'm not against identity at all, but I think it's what Christianity is talking to is meta identity. That doesn't mean it denies identity. It just means there's a hierarchy.
Mm.
Now, again, you can see the problem because, these people immediately get rejected by the Anglican Church itself. If it grew, they'd be rejected by the Catholic Church, which again speaks to this fragmentation that's going on. And I think the big one is, like you said, it's so easy to be manipulated and for certain powers in the world to utilize any Christian form or quote unquote Christian form of protest or action as, oh, here we go, it's all just evil and hateful and the rest of it. But it's this, it again, I have my own personal instinct with this is, and I don't think people are going to be able to do this. So I think it's going to fall into chaos largely. But there's almost a wisdom in the in Christ's teaching of lay your weapons down, and it's very hard to understand Christ's teaching there. I think there are different levels of what he means, but I think at the moment it's something like by fighting, we almost maintain the energy of modernity. It
Hmm.
keeps it ticking over, and it wants a force to push against, constantly to rile up. And you could say a lot of the culture war has been that on the whole. You just keep this constant noise of permacrisis going, and the next outrageous thing going, and
Hmm.
this battle goes on between the average person who are always looking at really what are annoying, but largely in the grand scheme of things, not the most consequential issues. Whereas the real powers behind the scene are still pulling the same shots, they're still controlling the
Yeah.
same things, and they go on whether they're meta left and right, really. So we take our eye off the actual ball. And when I say lay your weapons down, I know especially for men, they really don't like that. And I'm not saying allow yourself to get beaten up. I'm not saying don't fight against wrong. What I'm saying is there's a bigger picture here, and we have to be very, very careful of our own ego and what that wants to possess in the name of Christianity, rather than perhaps being more quiet and still and listening for the wisdom of the Spirit. Because it just seems to me that a lot of people are sheltered from seeing the truth by the reaction of certain people who want it to be so grand that, again, they get made out to be the bad guy very quickly. And it's very, very difficult, I think, for us to come to terms with that. But in my view, that's going to happen anyway, because without the essence of truth at the heart of the West, it's going to fall apart anyway. So
Mm.
I hope it makes sense what I'm saying there, but I think
It
there is a
does. It
wisdom
does.
in laying your weapons down.
I see. I said sort of similar message in a video not so long ago about the flags that suddenly appeared everywhere, quite conveniently after the horrible attacks that happened. Um, Name one. There was many attacks during that time. I think the stabbing on the bus had just happened as well, but for the Ukrainian girl not long before, and then something else happened not long after that, and then suddenly we see these flags appear everywhere and the St. George's Cross everywhere, and it does appeal to that pride in your country. I get the feeling, and but I was highly suspect of the whole operation. It's kind of like this happened too fast. The timing was too convenient. It's like they were trying to rile us up and get that Christian nationalist identitarian movement to just stand up and go, yeah, and do something. And it just didn't feel right, I just came, I just made a video saying, look, guys, just think about this. Just think a little bit. And I came up with this idea, I explained how there are long-term agendas at play here, where it seems like they want to play off this liberal regime against they want to kind of use the liberal regime to suppress Christianity first of all, get it angry, and then let it loose once it's angry enough, so they can use the reaction as an example of why we shouldn't have Christianity anymore. Look how violent they get, And I said they don't kind of play into the narrative, the game here. Level heads. Let's not go out there burning bridges down just yet. You know what I mean? Like, let's just wait a second, because I feel like we're kind of being played. And yeah, I got a lot of anger and vitriol towards you, like saying you're weak, you're pathetic. We need to rise up and fight for our nation, all this type of thing. We must do it now. And there's something about that attitude, this national Christianity, this cultural Christianity. It's like, you're not Christian, you're just from a Christian country and you want to maintain your tradition. And I get it. Because this is another thing I really empathize with them. It's kind of like, yeah, your little girls are being raped and things are going terribly wrong and the country's falling apart and we're at capacity. We can't get homes. Generations have been robbed of their future and we're going to be in that minority in our own country in by 2030 or something. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I get it. We have every right to be angry and pissed off. You do. But you need to focus on who let them in. Who did this to you? Who facilitated the environment and where we now have these symptoms? Do you know what I mean? And I think it's misplaced anger, primarily. And I think if we have any hope of turning it around, what we need are real, strong, Christian-valued men and women, if you can do that, in positions of power, where influence and change can actually be made. But the foundation has to be biblical. It has to be Christian. And I think that's where we can get the real authority and power, that masculine energy to make change happen more effectively. But we need to take the reins of power and we need to become the leaders of institutions, of schools, of places of education, of industry. We need to become, would you rather have a Christian in charge of these things or the opposite? You know? And I think that's a collective effort. That's going to take time. That's going to take organization in a way that's decentralized, but we all have a common goal in mind. We are members of the kingdom and we should be in control of these institutions. And again, my friend has this phrase. It's kind of like, the truth will not just be shared, it will be imposed. like you will be rich and prosperous and you will enjoy it and you'll take it whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? You will have righteous judgment and fair laws and success and happiness and peace on earth, whether you like it or not. You know, we will impose the truth on you. And I think there's something about that attitude. It's like, it's positive, it's a good outlook to have, but I think rather than channeling Christian identity and energy into something like that, they're trying to funnel this into war, basically. And as you said, that's just modernity. It's just more of the same, isn't it? I ramble. If you haven't been able to tell, I'll give it back to you and let you roll with that before we move on to another topic.
No. I mean, it's interesting to hear your perspective on these things. I mean, again, I think look, I understand what you're talking to with some of the absolutely awful things that are happening, and I think you obviously have to make provisions for those to protect yourself best you can. And the system will fight you in every way when you try and protect yourself. But I think it's more a case of having a community around you trust and minding your own business and doing your best to keep your head down and get on with your life lawfully and the rest of it. But as I say, I mean, I guess I'd say it's a bit of a black and a white pill. I just believe that this can't change until the collapse occurs, and this is why I'm wary of kind of worldly movements. I think it almost has to break down first in order for something new to begin, for there to be a reawakening. And until we're at that point, I think we're just going to get lots of false gods and false promises and people trying to pull it every which way because it will be so ideological rather than guided by the spirit.
I agree. The optimist in me wants to believe everything I just said. Trust me. Like, I'm an optimist by nature. But I do think we may have passed the threshold. I do think it is too late. And I do think there is going to be a collapse, whether we like it or not. And it might be a slow one. It might be a fast one. There's many ways civilizations can collapse, But I think what counts is who's going to pick up the pieces. Yeah. Because I can guarantee those who have facilitated this collapse already have a plan. They already have a phoenix they want to build from this ash. They already know where they're taking it. Do we? Are we prepared for the aftermath? What are we going to do? How are we going to counter their agenda, in a sense? Because I think there's a lot to be said for ideological possession. The ideologues in control don't really know what they're doing. They're just running on blind belief, in the false systems. But I do think there's a level of malevolence behind all this too. I think there is a spirit running through modernity which has a plan to purposely collapse everything. I really do. I think it's because a collapse would possibly be the best thing they can hope for if they want to destroy the old tradition of Christianity and replace it with something new. So they need that collapse for that reason. Now, I think luckily, thankfully, if Christians can realize, well, the kingdom of heaven is not of this earth. It doesn't matter what civilization rises or falls. Christianity can continue without a building or a church or a brick and mortar physical thing, And I think that's what needs to be remembered. If I think maybe that's our only hope. If it all is to collapse, is just do not forget what it actually means to be a Christian. It's not a building with a spire on top. It's not a. It's nothing physical on Earth necessarily. It's something. No, don't build up treasures on Earth. You know, and I think that's what he's alluding to. It's kind of everything is sand through the fingers. All is vanity. If you want to get Solomon about this and all Ecclesiastes about this, we need to focus on something bigger, something that transcends the country, the flag, the civilization, or even man-made tradition. You know, but even if the tradition's built upon solid foundations like Christianity, it's still just tradition. You know, and Christ came to destroy religious order and tradition. You know, I think he was trying to make it clear. You know, he said that temple, not one brick would be left. You know, it's all going to come down, and you have to understand it's not about the books, the ink, you know, the bricks, the stones, the physical stuff. It's about something more than that, and I think that's possibly our only hope. So in a way, I agree with you. I know it's all going to collapse. I do. But one can hope, right? A man can dream. Who knows?
Well, I guess so. I guess so. I mean, I think I speak about it so much. I'm sort of ready for the new era, but I think it'll be a long time, and there's a lot of money and invested interests in the world as it is right now, and I think we're gonna have to run it through to its apex, really.
Yeah. Well, sliding on a little bit here, I think, you know, we're talking about this rise of the identitarian right, and we could probably talk forever about our opinions on this, but I think there's been a change for the other side, the left. I think they've kind of evolved a little bit, or adapted, shall we say? Because I think the whole, and I think you talk about this, I think we all agree, they overplayed their hand a little bit with the woke stuff. They got a little bit too crazy, it went a bit too far. You know, as soon as they started trying to make it as though that pedophilia is just a sexual preference, and some of them can be virtuous. You know, when articles like this coming out in. You know, I think that's when people are like, "What the hell are you talking about now?" You know, and I think there has been a changing face of this, and I know you've talked about this in your own videos. Do you maybe want to give your own little spiel on this new woke that we're seeing today? This new, what do you call it? Reorganization? Is that what they've done? Is that a good way to describe it?
With regards to sort of what sense of a reorganization in woke?
Well, I think they're trying to rebrand themselves, like the Green Party, for example, to replace Labour. You know, because I feel like they need a new. I think they're trying to come across more again now as the common sense party, the ones that are more grounded. You know, we aren't the crazy, wacky liberals like we've seen in the past, but ideologically they're identical. But I feel like they're trying to play it different today. I think like they're trying to. Again, it's a rebrand more than anything. You know. Do you sense this yourself? Because I think it's to counter what's coming around the corner with reform, and I'd like to get your opinion on what you think of reform as well. Because British politics is not something that's often discussed on this channel, and I think this is something maybe you have a lot of opinions on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the first thing about reform and the new Green Party is really, I would see them both still as part of the broader order that we have at the moment anyway. They're just on opposing sides of the coin. I don't personally believe reform can do that much. I don't think they can. They're really going to change what I call the influence of money power. And the Green Party, for any American viewers, they're sort of our if you imagine a party who are even more left wing than the Democrats, that's sort of them, and then some, and they're a bit wacky. They believe all the
Mm,
woke stuff from a while ago, but it's sort of evolved. But in many senses, I just think they are following the ideology of liberalism to its end, really, in the sense of, you must accept everything at all times and rip apart any boundaries and borders at all times. And almost the worst sin you can have is to have a Western identity. So, in many senses, I don't really see anything new in the Green Party. I mean, it's got a new leader. They have some new rhetoric. They've tried to take on a lot of these like London geezers who have left wing perspectives, and you can see they're trying to again move to that post woke thing. But in many senses, the way I see it, it is just the same old message, which is, you know, anti everything. Well, Christianity once represented. Again, you could argue that a lot of the modern Anglican Church over here in England would would be pro the Green Party. But if I'm honest, I don't really see Reform or the Green Party as really doing anything that different. I think it's just
Mm.
going to continue the system as it is, and it gives people this false sense of hope. The most impactful thing I think is going on isn't so much reform in the Green Party, but the collapse of the centre, which is the sort of Blairite, again, for Americans, the sort of Bill Clinton, Obama style politics, which we had for so long and is really dominated still to this day. That's really falling away. And I think people are reaching to the Green Party if you're left wing and reform if you're right wing as a solution, but neither will really stand because, as I say, to my mind, they're both part of the liberal system.
Hmm.
What I think is genuinely challenging to the system are the arguments, again, of going back to much more conservative conceptions of religion, which really challenge the presuppositions of modernity. The identity thing we're seeing within Europeans, I think that is deeply challenging the system. And you could say the old left, which would be the hardcore communisty left, which still is, that's not really a thing, I don't think. You have the sort of woke socialist left, but the idea of total nationalization. I think this Zara Sultan, who's a bit like our AOC, was mooting it the other day, but it's just never going to go anywhere. So, the way I see it, it's all pretty much locked down right now. And the big political move will come after reform, in my mind. So, if reform
Mm.
get in 2029, which it looks like they will do, it'll be around 2034. I think will be the big time where it will basically be do or die at that point for Britain, because we will have seen reform will just go back to the market. It'll be Thatcherism, which is basically just globalism again, to my mind. That's something that I actually split my audience on, because some of them are kind of holding to this libertarian free market ideal. It's all you need is the market, get the government out of the way, no regulation, everything will right
Mm.
itself. I very much see that as sort of a worldly solution, and it's just going to lead to more corporate control. And I don't think it's a socialist government is the answer either, by the way. As you might
No.
imagine, I keep going to look, we've got to run it through. We've got to realize there are no worldly solutions here till we get back to ground zero.
I think that's the other difference between Christians and people who are just in the world, kind of going to and fro the motions with these kind of
Yeah.
political sways. When you say you're against one thing, they think you're for the opposite. And
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no,
No,
no, no, no,
exactly.
no, not even a little bit. Like I said, it's all a part of the liberal system. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
still playing. You're feeding the beast, really. It's all a part of the same machine.
It's all
Um,
materialism. That's the thing.
that's the issue, yeah. And I understand you can't stay around much longer, so we'll start wrapping this up a little bit. But I do agree with what you said. That British politics has this issue right now where the legacy parties of Conservative and Labour, they are zombies basically. They're already dead and they're being
Yeah.
propped up by one another for one last hurrah right now. And I think they know it, and they are pushing through everything they've ever wanted right now, without even thinking about us. You're not even a petition was started today. Did you know this? We have this pathetic system for the Americans listening, where you can petition on the government website, and if you get 100,000 signatures, they'll have to debate it in Parliament, or at least they'll consider it for
Yeah,
debate.
they'll consider
Something
it.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, whatever that means. Like, oh, wonderful. It's a good way to channel anger and rage into a useless place. But someone's actually been saying we need to get rid of Keir Starmer right now, and we need to call a new election. And it's gone up to, last I checked, it was like 117, 118,000 or something like this. And it's a good sense of like where we're at right now in the country when these type of things get thrown around. I do think people know like Keir Starmer is really just balls to the wall, just trying to initiate as much change as he possibly can to lock us down in a sense. And it's kind of like it's going to be a long time before they can undo the laws we make, and it basically turns into a socialist hellhole.
But do you,
And
do you really think it's Keir Starmer doing it though? Do you know what I
no,
mean?
no,
Yeah, like he's a bank manager, really.
he's a puppet. There's
Yeah,
people
yeah,
pulling the strings behind all of this. I think ideally what they want is a world where it's cashless
yeah.
first and foremost. All your money is easily switched off and controlled via digital means, which again is a good way to create conformity and control. And I think they basically want to continue that utopian vision of a one world totalitarian regime where it's one money, one language, a borderless world, it's globalism on steroids. And it's going to take a long time to get there. But it's like a death by a thousand cuts situation, isn't it? And this is just another one. And it's one regime stooge after another who's going to implement more change with each passing policy, and like a frog in a boiling pot, before we know it, we're going to be in it, and it's going to seem like it was always that way. And I think that's how they're doing this step by step. But the problem is they get a lot of resistance now as well, and I think they understand people are angry and pissed off, and I think there's control measures in place to guide that anger down the wrong paths again, like we talked about with this rise of national Christianity. There's a consciousness rising in civilization of a relationship with God, but they're going to try and control that, I think, and lead it into Crusader Christianity instead of relationship with God Christianity. I think they have the contingencies in place, because I think they know that deistic spirit of man will always rise up when times get hard, when tribulation comes. And I don't have answers. I just got ideas, and theories. But I don't think Keir Starmer is the guy. He's not the Satan himself, the adversary. He's just another here today, gone tomorrow agenda pusher. And he gets rich doing it. He gets to live his happy life and go off into the sunset after all this is over, and we'll forget about him, and it'll be the next thing we're dealing with, the next devil we don't know we have to deal with. And I think parties like Reform, it's an illusion. I think again they've given us our heroes, and I think it's all a part of that liberal regime as you would describe it. I would call it a overarching parasitical conspiracy that's been in the works for over 100 years, but they have a plan and they're sticking to it. That's for sure. I think we just come at it from different perspectives, but fundamentally I think we're on the same side. We see the problem, and I think the solution is God and a relationship with Jesus. That's my takeaway from this. Any closing thoughts for yourself there, Richard? I don't want to keep you too long. I know you've got family yourself and it's late, so maybe we should wrap it up here.
Yeah, no, it's appreciated. Everyone in my house has got a cold at the moment, so I need to be up first thing to get my son out of bed and get him ready and the rest of it. So it's appreciated. But no, I mean, again, as I say, I sort of echo what you said there. I think it's we're in chaotic times, but again, I think if you are a Christian, if you are drawn to the Spirit, we don't have to fear a damn thing. Like, don't worry about it. Let it happen. These things will occur, and trust in the Spirit, and we will be guided in the direction we need to go. As you might imagine, a lot of that faith comes from my early life experiences. I thought I was done for. Friends around me were dropping like flies, and then bam, you think, okay, I had no idea that was coming. And it really relied on me opening myself up, getting out of my own way, and listening to the whim of the Spirit. And I don't claim to be have any special knowledge or any incredible insights that anybody else does, but I do think that light is in us all, and it really is the return to that. And that's why I think, again, every sling and arrow we get from the world, we shouldn't fear it. We should welcome it, because it brings us closer to that realization.
Amen. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate you coming on to do this. That was a good conversation. Sorry again if I went on a little bit. I tend to ramble, but I think
no worries at all. No worries at all.
I think that was fruitful, and I think obviously people listening have probably gained a nice perspective there what it is to be a British Christian in this landscape. It's a different world to the American Christian world. It really is. And in many ways, we're actually not really allowed to have this opinion in Britain either. So we're kind of up against it in other ways as well. So far, I'm getting away with saying
at 3 a.m. probably, won't we?
Well, I'm on a list at least. But, luckily so far, it seems like we're in a time where we can get away with saying these things right now for some reason. And even that I'm wary of. There's something going on here. Like, I don't know why we're getting away with noticing so much and talking about it. But at the same time, fundamentally, I think we do have to remember God is in control. And, men make plans and God laughs. So, yeah, I agree with your message. Let's have faith. Let's stay strong and positive, and moving forward, let's just have each other's back and be there for one another. But yeah, thanks for doing this, Richard. It's been good.
Yeah, right on. You're welcome, my friend. Thanks for having me, and lovely to be on your show.
No problem. Stay in touch. I'll speak to you soon.
Will do. Take care, my friend.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, let me just quickly switch the screen back. That was a nice conversation, wasn't it? You know, we come from relatively different worlds online. But I find now that I'm at this level where I've suddenly gone over 100,000 subscribers, that adds weight, apparently, and you can just reach out to people, and usually they're quite open to talk to you of any background. And I'm utilizing this as best I can. And he was one of those channels I've been watching for a while. And again, he's very much discussing the on the ground, the politics of the day-to-day, of what's happening on a daily basis, giving that commentary from like more of a Christian perspective, and which is, again, in Britain, you don't really hear. And I'm a British person. Obviously, I spread the gospel and the truth of Christ as much as I can, but I'm in such a niche corner that I don't reach a British audience, really. I mean, I know I've got Mark in the chat here, you know, who's our resident British person, who's always here, but it's kind of really, you know, I show you my demographics. I do not have a large British audience, maybe 5%, 3, 4, 5, 6, up and down. It's very small. America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia are kind of the bulk of it, and Britain's in that little mix, you know, but America's the main bulk. And it's because there aren't many British voices out there talking about these things, and unfortunately there aren't actually many British people interested in listening to the gospel from a contrarian, more conspiratorial based perspective. You just don't find it, and I feel Richard's doing a great job of reaching a lot of people with the basics of Christianity and tradition and what it means to have a relationship that's with God that's rooted in your own tradition and history. Because Britain does have a rich Christian history, like it does, you know, and it's had its ups and downs and wars and a lot of things in between, you know, but fundamentally it's built on the foundation of the laws of God. And we can't let that go. It's something good. It's something wonderful. It's not a new experiment. It's thousands of years in the making, you know. And I think our architecture is a testimony to that. Our cathedrals and our systems. And yes, corruption has certainly seeped its way in through the better half of the 20th century into the 21st century. And again, someone like Richard is doing a good job at connecting to a younger mind, a younger new generation, what it means to be a Christian, really, and what it means to understand where we come from and why we have our morality. So I encourage you to go and listen to Richard IV. Links are in the description, and go and check out some of his work. It is different from what I offer, from the way I do things, but we're on the same side, that's for sure. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Richard. If you're still listening, I really appreciate your work. And yeah, like I said, stay in touch and maybe we can do it again sometime. I know these things seldom actually do happen, but as a courtesy, you're always welcome here at Understanding Conspiracy. But yeah, there we go, guys. What did you think of that? Let me know in the chat if you enjoyed it. I'm going to take a quick break, get a drink of water, and then I'm going to come back, and you've got me for about half an hour more. And we can just have a bit of a Q&A, a bit of a back and forth, and a bit of a talk before I close this show out. I'm going to play a quick 1-minute advert here, and I'll be back. I just need to run downstairs and grab the glass of water I forgot to bring upstairs.
In a world where 54% of Americans read below a 6th grade level.
Could you read this?
It's impossible. I just see his words everywhere.
One man wrote a book about the hidden truth behind clowns.
I finally finished it. But everything's gonna be okay now.
Links down below to the Amazon.
But he was about to find out.
Your primary market is the USA, and it ranks 36th in global literacy rates, with over 43 million adults unable to read or write.
Getting the truth to people is no day at the circus.
You know, sometimes I wonder if I'm the real clown.
Nobody reads anymore.
Have you considered recording an audiobook?
You're going to get a sore throat.
You're serious about this, aren't you?
You don't understand. I have to do this. The people have to know.
That book will ruin everything.
I will not use AI to record this.
We can't let him reach them.
This is just something I need to do. I don't even like clowns. The end.
Now they can hide that they're completely illiterate. This is amazing.
This season, playing on rectangular devices with black screens near you. The Nephilim looked like clowns. The audiobook.
And I am back. How are we all doing, guys? Yeah, by comparison, like I am a raving lunatic. Like Richard has a way of presenting himself, which is very cool, very calm, very British, very collected, very respectable. And if you've been listening to me for so long, maybe that was a bit of a shock to the system. And I hope you enjoyed listening to another British person present themselves. But yeah, by comparison, I am not coherent at all. But I did enjoy that conversation. So what's going on in the chat, guys? How are we doing? Better than Richard III. That's right, Mark. That's right. I was here this whole time thinking you were going to talk about an actual king named Richard, says Jacob. I'm sorry to disappoint. This wasn't a history lesson, no. Richard IV is not a real character. No, not at all. But it's... that's the name of his YouTube channel. So again, go check him out. He's on Substack as well. Exclusive content on there. I'm plugging his stuff for you, so you can go and check that out too if you're interested. More of the spicier things. But he also has another channel, his sister channel. It's on his channel. You can find it quite easily, which really gets into the spiritual stuff. Being a Christian, his main channel is more about the political commentary and the day-to-day goings on in England. And if you're curious about what's happening in this country, he's a good source, a good Christian source to get that perspective on what's actually happening here. So I'd highly recommend, and he's got my endorsement. So there we go. I love these ads, says Wendy. You're not bored of that ad? I need to make a new ad soon, just for fun. I'll try and figure something out, but I'm looking forward to when I get the second book published, like making new adverts again for that one as well. And I think my first advert is going to be playing on the idea they took me so long to write it. It's going to be something about running along that theme of just how I've took way too long or something like that, or how people have waited so long that some people have died already and all this type of thing. I don't know. There's something there. I've got a vision. I just need to mold that vision into something coherent. But I do have ideas for future adverts. Yeah, I do. That was a great convo. Thank you so much, brothers. No, thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it. Yeah, if anyone's got any last minute questions, again, you've got me for a little bit, 20 minutes or so, something like that, up to 2 hours. So we can talk, guys. You've got me. Did everyone have a good holiday season? I kind of took the week off. I've been releasing some old recordings, some interviews I did here and there. I didn't do the live Q&A on Wednesday for that reason. I've just kind of been taking some time off, dealing with family and stresses and other things are just happening behind the scenes in my own life, which I don't need to bore you with whatsoever. But yeah, I've just I've been under it. I've been a little bit under it. I'm not going to lie. Stress is definitely the word of the week, and pressure and just all sorts of things. But I've kind of been looking forward to this conversation, and I don't have anything else really to say. I don't have any spiels to give, but I'm happy to talk with you guys for a little bit if you've got anything you want to say. So Joseph Bookham says, I'm a believer in God, but I'm having a hard time with Jesus. What is the best evidence you've seen besides the Bible that could you can give to someone who is struggling? Or what exactly are you struggling with Jesus? I mean, if you read the Gospels, it's pretty clear who he was and what he came to do and why he came to do it. God said, this is my son with whom I am well pleased. And if you're reading the Old Testament where you seem to be okay with God, everything is pointing to the Messiah, and Jesus fulfilled every single criteria necessary for the Messiah, and he reconciled the sins of man from Adam. Adam brought sin into the world and death, and thus through one man, Jesus Christ, the whole world was redeemed. I don't think there's really that much of an issue with Christ. I feel like maybe it's a pride issue fundamentally. I don't know you from Adam, so I couldn't say, but what exactly specifically is holding you back? Is it historical evidence? Because there's no more historical evidence for the existence of a figure in history than there is Jesus Christ. There's less for Caesar, you know what I mean? But you believe he existed. There's far less for most historical figures. We know Jesus was real and did exist and had real interactions with people and an impact. We know. It's like the Roman legionnaires who were involved with it. It was documented by other people out within the circles, you know, who talked of even the followers of Christ as well. So I don't think you have any reason to doubt his existence. And, you know, he was witness to rise from the dead. And that, again, we know this. And it's a miracle. And is that the problem? Or do you not believe in miracles? Do you not think God has the power to raise people from the dead? So I struggle to understand what you mean exactly. Now, luckily, I'm in a privileged position that I've had supernatural experiences which make me know that he's real. I didn't need the book to convince me that he was real. Being born again and having that transformative supernatural experience of being changed from within and having your desires completely rewritten and becoming a new creation just by asking God for help, and then obviously calling on the name of Jesus Christ to free me from demonic oppression and spiritual attacks and the rest of it, you know, which again is, if Eddie Richards' audience is still listening to this, you know, I believe in a supernatural Christianity. I'm not just a cultural Christian. And I think those experiences, which, you know, from my own psychedelic background, is why I kind of know there's a spiritual realm as well. And it's kind of that these knowings I have through experience. Not everybody, I understand, gets to have those type of experiences. So they are coming at it from more of a blind faith aspect where they just have to take the word's word for it sometimes. But I would say sincerely, if you ask and you will receive, if you sincerely humble yourself before God and ask him to reveal himself to you, it might happen. Just be careful what you wish for, I suppose. There's another thing I'll say as well. Be careful what you wish for. Paul, what are your thoughts on hypnotic regression to remember thoughts from your past? I would say I don't think you need anything like that if you want to start remembering things from the past. All you need to really do is just have quiet moments of contemplation, and those type of things naturally start to reveal themselves to you. Keep a clear head, remain sober, and have those moments of quiet contemplation, and I think you'll find you'll start remembering things. There's no shortcut to healing of trauma. There's no shortcuts. Really, there's no miracle cure. There's no pill you can take or some magic thing you can do. You have to confront it head on. And you have to pull on strings to reveal more. You need to ask questions. You need to speak to people. And you need to get to the bottom of things through diligent research and time. And if anything has been suppressed or regressed within your mind through trauma, if you seek, you'll dig it up. It will come back out. And then you can process it correctly. But I would be weary of putting yourself into any kind of suggestible hypnotic trance from another person, especially considering the spiritual warfare that we actually find ourselves on a daily basis. You're probably just letting your guard down and open yourself up to demonic attack in some way or some kind of spiritual hedging issue. So I just be careful. I would be very careful. Do you have a lot of viewers from Africa at all? I have some. I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, I'm quite curious now you say it. I'm going to have a look now, see what I can find. Someone just bought a paperback book. Initials DM. If you're listening, I've got your payment and I will get that out to you as soon as possible. I have a brand new batch of books turning up in the next couple of days. I've already ordered it. I think I have like 2 paperbacks and 8 hardcovers or something. So if anyone wants a copy of The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, let me know and I can get a signed copy out to you in the post. It's $50 for paperback. I might have 1 left. And I think it's $60 for hardcover as well. So I'm just going to my YouTube studio here. I'm going to try and get demographics up. And let's just find out exactly what my audience is, just for fun. Audience. And where's demographics? Where can I find demographics? My peak number of age of listeners, 26% of you are 35 to 44. Yeah, I have an older viewership. Okay, top geographies. Let's see more. So in the last 28 days, this is United States is 67%, United Kingdom is 8%, Canada is 5%, Australia is 2%, Germany is 1%, South Africa is 0.5%, and then it's kind of just split up between all the other countries by like 0.1%, pretty much everywhere. I got Kenya, Malaysia, Honduras, Grenada, Albania, India, Hong Kong, Costa Rica, Slovenia, Turkey, Austria, South Korea, Puerto Rico, Denmark, Thailand, Bulgaria. These are like 10 views, 11 views, 30 views. Nigeria, Israel, I get 71 from Israel. Philippines, Finland, Hungary, Argentina. It's an eclectic mix. But my top 3 are United States, United Kingdom, and Canada, with Australia coming there at a quite distant 4th, to be honest. So there we go, if anyone's wondering about my demographics. What else have we got? It's been 84 years, cue Titanic flute. Just scrolling down. Going through marital change, as I need to have faith in myself and morals, as her public-facing life has stopped me from speaking at all online. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, Alaska Boy. What was that in context to? Is there a reason you told me that? I'm sorry if I've missed something. I do apologize. I'm a bit all over the place. Just while I'm trying to figure that out, waffles or pancakes, which one is best in your opinion? I do like a good crunchy waffle, the crunch of a waffle. I'm not going to lie. So I would go for waffle. There we go. Why do you think God allows some to be born again without any proof, like Paul or you, but not everybody else gets that experience, even when salvation is without works, but only through faith? And why do some get faith and some don't? I can't answer that question. I think everything's working in God's plan to his own ends, and we kind of have to shut up and put up with it, to be honest. It's like, it's none of our business why God chooses to do things for others and not for some. I really can't be one to talk on God's behalf about his grand plan. I have the feeling it's necessary. Maybe what each individual needs to go through is what each individual needs to go through, and he knows what's best for them. And for me, I needed that in that moment, or perhaps I would have ended it. You know, I might not be here. I might have been in a much worse situation. And perhaps, again, the whole God's action figure kind of type of analogy which Dan comes up with, I think perhaps that's all it is. Like, he just needed me in a certain place at a certain time to say a certain thing, and to get me there, he had to do that thing where he revealed himself to me in a specific way, just so I would say that thing at the right time at the specific point for someone else I probably don't even know I impacted. You know what I mean? And I think he's doing that for everybody, individually in their own ways. But I think if you ask, then you probably will receive. But until you ask, it's up to him, really, isn't it? And I don't know. I can't answer that. How could I possibly have an answer for that? I can only theorize and give you ideas and concepts and speculate. I really can. Now, when I say ask and you'll receive, I think it's not just a simple saying, all right, God, I want to know, and then that's it, just expecting something to happen. There was an active seeking going on. I was searching for God, you know, and I think he let me go on a wild goose chase for a long time, looking in all the wrong places, you know, and while I was doing that, in a way, I suppose I was gaining wisdom, and he let me persist in my folly until I became wise. You know, I think that's all it is, and I think it got to a point where it's kind of like, okay, now he's looked everywhere else for me, and let me show him where I really am. I think it was a process. But if you're not sincerely seeking, why should he, in a sense? You know, if it's just well, it would be nice if he would. Is that really the right attitude? You know, again, I think it's a matter of the heart sometimes, and God knows us. He knows our hearts. He knows the wicked, and he knows our true intentions behind why we want things, you know. And he, in the end, like any father, he knows what's best. So I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust that. And that's all we can do. And I know that's not satisfying. I'm sorry that that's not a satisfying answer. What do you think alien abduction scenarios are? Says Jacob. I remember a lot of it, but I was wondering if I should unlock more memories. Alien abduction scenarios are demonic attack. You're not being abducted by aliens and taken to some spacecraft somewhere. You were likely paralyzed in your bed, and in the dream world or the astral realm or wherever it is, you were being messed with and projected a reality that wasn't real, so you could go out there and spread the false narrative of aliens being real. That's more likely what was happening. And they could also have been extracting genetic material from you in order to create hybrids. I do know that kind of thing's going on as well. So but you weren't visited by aliens from space. You were basically being played around with by fallen angels and demonic entities. I would say that. What Paul's guest today said about losing friends after coming to the Lord is what I've been going through big time lately, says Vincent Price. Yeah, you know, there's definitely an element of losing people close to you when you choose to openly profess your faith in Jesus. That is true. I think a lot of it comes from people's own personal hang-ups and baggage and weight to what they think it means to be a Christian. And I think a lot of people assume that means you're now judging them or you think you're better than them in some way. Because the world has told them that Christians are these judgmental, holier-than-thou types who are saved while everyone else is going to burn type of attitude. The truth is, most Christians see themselves as worthless sinners and wretches who didn't deserve to be saved, and are just thankful and blessed that they even have a chance at being redeemed, and it's every day is a struggle in a world that hates you. You know, that's really what being Christian is and what we have to put up with. It's rough. It's a rough journey. It is, but I think in a way, these people who abandon you just because you've come to God perhaps were never meant to be in your life anyway. I have a friend who I grew up with just down the street, you know. We've been friends since we were 5 years old. And I should have seen the signs growing up that perhaps our friendship wasn't really as strong as I thought it was. But, you know, it's a childhood friend, and we were with each other every day growing up into our teens, having these conversations, you know, these deep talks into the night, and you know, doing what you do when you're in your teenage years, thinking you're being deep when really it's just surface level stuff that you just need to get the basics down before you go to high level stuff, you know. But at the time, you know, it was necessary. And, you know, he would come round to my shed. My parents had this brick shed, which was quite warm, you know, and you could put a heater on in there. It's quite comfortable with some nice chairs. We had shelving, we put a TV in there, you know. It was like a den we would go into, and he'd come round and he'd smoke with me and have a cigarette, and we'd talk into the night and drink, you know, and whatever. And that was me. I was that guy for a while that people could come to and do those things. My parents were quite liberal, easygoing, you know, types. And as we grew up and got older, you know, we went to university and I got into the conspiracy stuff and I became born again, you know, and I went through my journey, as you all heard. And he went off and did a computer science degree. He's very much that type of guy, atheistic, logistical, scientifically minded, facts and logic, wearing glasses, always in the computer type person, you know. And I was the free spirit artistic type. You know, I'm completely the polar opposites, really. But he was my friend. My best friend, as far as I was concerned. Nothing could separate us. Nothing could break us up. But then he met up with me a few times, you know, as you do, because we've been away from each other so long, living our lives at different places in the country and studying. And next thing I hear, he's talking to our friend group who stayed at home, you know, who didn't go to university and got jobs instead. Like, it relayed back to me that he's asking them all, like, what the hell happened to Paul? What's wrong with him? You know, that was my first sign. Maybe not the first. That's the first sign I was aware of, you know. And I found there was a distance then. Things started to go away, and I was just the crazy conspiracy theorist type who lost his mind. And I tried to talk with him and reason with him and explain to him what I believe and why. And I could tell he was just judging me. He's like, Paul's lost his fucking mind. Like, he's a lunatic. Because we were quite anti-religious together, you know, and now I found God. I think he was confused. I don't think he really understood. And, you know, years went by and we did meet up every now and then, and I didn't really bring up my beliefs with him because it didn't matter. I wasn't good. I didn't care, you know. He's still the boy I grew up with, you know, and we're in our late 20s now and early 30s. And yeah, and you know, I'm getting married and I invite him to my wedding. Of course I do, you know. And he's like, no, I'm okay. And I just couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand this idea that my best friend who I've known my entire life, wouldn't want to come to my wedding. And he's like, oh, well, we're not really friends, are we? You know, we don't talk to each other anymore. We don't really visit each other. You don't really text me, ask you how I'm doing. And that's fair enough. But I was always under this assumption, like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how long we went without talking to each other. We were still practically family, you know. And I have that relationship with other people. Like, I have another friend who I did just message the other day after not talking for years. And it's like nothing's changed. And we're meeting up again soon, you know, to catch up. And I thought I had that relationship with him, but he didn't see me like that. He never has. And I realized I was always actually just a friend of convenience to him. He was my friend because he could use me for my shed. He didn't actually like me. He never actually... I don't think he was ever really my friend. And you don't realize this until afterwards, but I think me expressing my faith in Christ was that final straw for him. It was like, oh, well, maybe that's run its course now. And I'm a loyal person, so I had this assumption that, you know, you're my friend forever. You know, it didn't matter like how distance or time or anything of that stuff was irrelevant to me, and it always has been irrelevant to me. But he didn't see it that way. No, it's kind of like, well, you know, you're not really in my life anymore. We don't live in the same place. There's no utility to our friendship anymore. I'm not going to go back home to our hometown anymore because I live here now, you know, and I've got my own thing going on. It's like, well, we're just not really friends anymore. And that's okay. That's fine. You know, don't worry about it. Thanks for the invite, but I'm not coming. It's fine. And I was like shocked to the core, you know, like that the blasé nature of it all. But then it's kind of, I realized there was signs throughout my entire life that this was always the case. I was a friend of convenience. I was never really a friend. There was actually nothing there. It was empty and hollow. And I think those experiences are wisdom-inducing moments of terror and horror, existential horror, because you realize just what people really are. Fickle, untrustworthy, liars, lovers of self, you know, and users of other people as well. And some people are narcissists, some people are psychopaths, some people are sociopaths, some people are unempathetic. And no one sees the world the same as each other. And fundamentally, a lot of people are just out for themselves. And I think, in a way, I'm kind of thankful for that experience now in hindsight, because I am better off without them in my life, fundamentally. And I've moved on, and I feel like I don't no longer burden the weight of worrying about what he's going to think of me and my new beliefs either. I couldn't care less anymore. But I did care then, because I didn't want to lose a friend. But what have I gained? You know, I have God. I have Jesus. I have salvation. And since then, I have moved on, and you know, I've got a wife, children, a life, and the confidence to proclaim boldly the truth as I see it. I mean, I won't trade it for a thing, realistically. So, you know, I'm sorry to hear you've lost friends. I am. I get it. I know it's rough. But also look forward to the future. And now what you see as a loss could be a gain. You can make it so. Don't worry too much. My wife says, personally, I wouldn't be turning out any. Give me a waffle or a pancake. Who cares? Both are good. Lightening things up there as usual. But yeah, you're right. I do like a good pancake too. Don't get me wrong. My wife and I are working on our dry mix recipe for our waffle. If it's able to be sent over to the UK once we get it made, I'll send you guys a batch. I really don't know if waffles are going to survive the transit from the US to the UK. UK here. Glad to be part of the 8%. There you go. You've got Sweden here, says Avanti Design. Well, thank you. Again, people from all over the world come and listen to this channel, and that's amazing. That's truly an amazing thing. And it's a testimony to, you know, the power that Christ has to bring people together of all walks of life from all over the world, the earth, the world, whatever you want to call it, you know, just to feel that sense of community over a shared belief, and it's a wonderful thing. Let me just scroll down to the chat, see what's going on. I've missed a big chunk of chat. I'm trying to catch up. So this is a follow-on from the whole situation with Alaska Boy and his wife. She has no background in religion and did not want kids, and I should have realised that before. She dreamed for the red carpet and is almost there. I need to be steadfast in who I am. I'm sorry, Alaska Boy, that so you have such differences between you and your wife, and there's a divide there. I would say, you know, you can be who you are and let her be who she is, and marriage, it can be that, you know. Everyone's working out their own salvation in their own time, and I wouldn't say you have to necessarily deny yourself or your own beliefs for another person. Never do that. But at the same time, you can't force other people to believe what you believe either. So there is balance to be had there, and it's how much are you willing to forgive and move on from, fundamentally. Guitar churches are very uncomfortable. I'll take mass any day, though I prefer personal practice. Okay, I don't know why you said that, but fair enough. It seems that the UAP community actually tries to ignore the fact that abductions are ended by calling on the name of Jesus. 100% is an illusion, although I don't doubt they feel real for them. Yeah, that's true. Paul, remember, Father knows best wasn't satisfying to Adam and Eve either. Hence why they ate from the tree. I know. Well, that's just the eternal refrain of mankind, isn't it? What can we do? Apparently Pearl made a great point according to the calls of Con. I think many of the channels that seem authentic are controlled op. Who are we talking about here? Well, what's Pearl saying? Pearl, where are you? Conspiracy culture is growing here in the US. They've been setting up their controlled ops to talk about the same stuff we do. Makes me worry about what kind of conspiracies will make it in the mix. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've noticed this rise in the popularity of conspiracy theory. I really have. I've been watching it for like 10 years, and I've noticed suddenly a lot of podcasts are injecting themselves into the community and have amassed big followings very quickly all of a sudden. And the kind of trivializing conspiracy, making it a hobby to talk about or something, not a lifestyle in a sense, you know, making just a fun, trivial comedy situation of some. I've noticed that trend, but I've also noticed a lot of sudden whistleblowers are coming out with these really outrageous stories, or people trying to make names to themselves, coming out with really surface level stuff, you know, that's boring or trivial compared to like the cutting edge of conspiracy we're talking about over here on these channels and the small groups we've got going on. The landscape has changed, and I think a lot of nonsense, a lot of trivial bullshit has been injected into the truth community. A lot of gatekeeping, surface level conspiracy stuff has gained popularity again, and I find depth is what we're missing in the community these days. And I think that's by design. I think it's been flooded with those who lack the depth. It used to be that it was like this small group of really, really concerted like researchers who were really focused on their own core things and were contributing to one another to create a bigger picture. Now I find it's anybody and everybody has a conspiracy podcast, and they've trivialized the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying they're all controlled opposition. Absolutely not. But I think there's been an encouragement for that to be the case. And then, of course, you've got the classic literal feds agents out there who are literally saying the most absurd, ridiculous things you could ever hear at all, with no evidence really to back anything up of what they're claiming, just to make us look stupid too. They're also out there as well. And I feel like I can sense who that is when I see him. I'm not going to lie, you can just kind of tell, and you just give them a wide berth, avoid them. Don't point them out, don't play their game, don't get into criticisms of individuals, because that just ends up blowing up in everybody's face. That's kind of what they want as well. They're bait. to cause division. Just move on and ignore and keep your wits about you. That's what I could say. But there's definitely some controlled opposition out there. Absolutely. What are your thoughts on obligations towards family members who are continuing to lie? Are we supposed to stay close to them because they're family? Serious lies. I don't think we have obligations to keep family members in our lives if they're actively trying to hurt us or lie to us or deceive. I understand blood is thicker than water. I understand these ties, these familial bonds. Well, they're family, you know, so there's nothing you can do about it. But I think family is a title that's earned. You know. Oh, you want to be my brother? Act like it. You want me to love you as a mother? Then be one. Some people fell short or continue to fall short of the titles that was bestowed on them de facto. Titles are earned. You know, and I do feel like you can have unconditional love for your fellow man and your mother and father, and you can honour them as best you can. I understand that. But if they have failed to fulfill their side of the bargain and actually fulfill the role of being a mother or a father, then I think you can safely null and void that contract and walk away. That's kind of the way I see it. It's a two-way. A relationship is a two-way street at the end of the day. And I don't think God calls us to suffer fools and to put ourselves in harm's way or danger or neglect or psychological trauma just because social convention tells us that we're supposed to, because they're family. I think we're living in a new age where we're realizing that that's kind of bullshit. You don't have to love your abuser just because they're family. If they've abused you, then as far as I'm concerned, they renounced their title as family. And you can wash your hands clean of them. So that's my view right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should be more forgiving. But at the same time, you can forgive people and move on and not carry that weight around with you, but you don't have to hang around with them anymore. Two things can be true at the same time. I forgive you, but you're not my family. You know, you can do that. Thank you so much for that friend story, Paul. It's downright heartwarming knowing you're actually not alone. Amazing how many Christian stories share so much in common. Yeah, you know, I think it's good to share these stories because everyone's gone through it. My story is probably not unique at all, not even a little bit. And hearing these things out loud, I do know help people. So that's why I'm a bit of an open book and I'll share with you my own experiences. But at the same time, you know, if you can't tell a friend what you believe without them leaving you, then they were never really your friend to begin with. That's not what friends are, you know. It was like the size of a football stadium the room was in. They kept telling me I was one of the ones out of millions they chose and they hadn't before to see. Okay. Yeah, you sound like you had an encounter with something demonic, to be honest. I don't think aliens came to you. Paul is like 15 minutes behind on chat. Sorry, guys. The chat's got way ahead of me. Yeah, I've lost it. I don't know where I am. I'm scrolling back as best I can to do what I can. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm just gonna go straight down to the bottom, and I'm up to date with the chat now. So here's your chance, guys. We'll get one more in. Then I'm gonna call it a night because I've been going for over 2 hours now. What's a lot of bait out there? Yeah. I look back and see it throughout my life. It's quite sad. I never believed whistleblowers would go on big shows. That's probably wise. We talk about French toast recipes. Likes are still free. They are, absolutely. And a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, 36, and a person's enemy with those of his own household. Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, the truth is a weapon. And people, whether that's family or friends or strangers, don't like it when weapons are swung at them. People don't like it when you tell them the truth. And it's the truth teller who's the problem, not the truth itself. So that's just how it works. And unfortunately, you need to come to terms with that and realize if you're about to tell somebody the truth about something, they're probably not going to appreciate it. Just be prepared for that, you know. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. You forgive and move on without them in your life. Exactly. Dust off your feet and carry on. If you wouldn't let your friend treat you that way, don't let your family do it either. Exactly. Life is all about chances and choices. Use wisely and always try to walk away from or run from fools in trouble. Yeah, exactly. Do you know the Book of Jasher? Yes, I know of the Book of Jasher. What are you guys from the death penalty? Do you think we should be demanding that as a society? You know, I can't help but sometimes feel like that some of the bastards out there have done this to us. Just a good old-fashioned hanging would solve everything. Maybe that's my flesh speaking there, my human side coming out. I think it's best just to expose lies with our words and live as an example. And by comparison, those who do evil, will fall out of favor quite quickly and be exposed for what they are. But if it's the norm to be evil, then those who do evil won't be held accountable because it's normal. If we can live an example and live righteously and make others understand what it means to live righteously and the benefits of living righteously, then those who do evil will be easily seen and will not be able to do evil. So I think that's probably a better method than let's just kill all the people we think are evil, because even evil people can be redeemed. So perhaps the death penalty isn't the best solution as a Christian, okay? But it certainly feels like the easiest solution at the time, doesn't it? But I think we need to find another way. The only way, the truth, the way, and the life, and that's through the example of Jesus Christ. And with that, guys, I'm probably going to have to leave it there because I've been going over 2 hours now. It's getting late. We've had a good talk. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking so many wonderful questions. I hope my ramblings have helped you in some way. Make sure to go and subscribe to Richard IV. Check out his channel. Check out his work. I think when you listen to what he has to say, you'll start to realize, this guy's got his head screwed on. He's got some solid opinions, and obviously he's a brother in Christ too, so show him some support. And other than that, if you do want a copy of the Nephilim Look Like Clowns, I do have a fresh batch turning up in the post any day now. I ordered it like a week ago. It usually takes about a week to turn up. I usually get no forewarning, but it will be here soon. So if you want to get yourself a hard copy or the last paperback, if I still have one, I have to double check that, just email me at understandingconspiracy@gmail.com and we can get that sorted out for you as soon as possible. So thanks for listening, guys. And as always, God bless.